All right. Lesson 3, Yama, Satya. Asteya. Satya was last week. Asteya is non-stealing. After non-violence and non-lying, we now have non-stealing. We found out last week that violence is something that causes a big wave of disturbance. Physical violence is very obvious. Verbal violence too, although there are many subtle ways like cynicism and you know, in Dutch we say stinging people under the waterline. Being mean and then being able to deny it, so to speak. That's a form of violence. But even when people have only violent thoughts without expressing them verbally or physically, you feel that. With lying, we also saw that when you're confronted with a person who's lying to you, even though you don't have concrete proof, you feel that they are lying. The vibration just isn't right. And this has very serious consequences because when people lie, you don't want to associate with them. The people who lie find it very difficult to find people to work with them, to cooperate with them, to help them, etc. The opposite is also true. If you practice truthfulness, non-lying, it leads to synergy. It leads to trust, and people feel good to be around you. And if there is something that can be done together, they would love to do it together with you. Stealing, in the same vein, is something that you can feel if you trust your intuition. And people who work in security or customs or police, they are trained to spot people who don't have good intentions. People doing security in department stores are very focused on catching people. They haven't stolen yet, but they feel that they are up to something. And from the moment that they catch sight of you, they will just follow you around. And sometimes they make mistakes, of course, that's not the point. But the point is, there is a vibration, and it is one that is negative. And when people pick up on that, they turn away from you. Or worse. It can lead to serious conflict, of course. The purpose of the yamas is not to become holier than Tao or holier than the Pope. It is purely selfish. We want more harmony in our life, more peace of mind in our life, within ourselves, but also with the world around us. Less conflict, less misery and suffering. And just considering the practice of non-violence and how to avoid it, how to avoid ending up in violent situations or reacting in violent ways impulsively, lying and stealing. If you just consider these subjects and become more aware of it, you will naturally reduce that in your life, and you will see immediate results in the way that the outside world and you interact with one another. It becomes more harmonious, more friendly, and there will be more trust as a result of that. How do you recognize theft? That is the fourth paragraph. As you recognize violence through pain, lies through an unpleasant, nasty flavor, you recognize theft through a feeling that something is not right. Now, about theft, we live in a world with modern technology. There's a lot of data and information available for which we don't pay. Technically, if we access information, books, music, without paying for it, it's a form of theft. But I always mention this in class because we live in a different world now than 30 years ago. Also, 30 years ago, before internet and social media and everything, when you only had a radio and a TV, you went to the library to borrow books, which were either free or very cheap from the community center or from the government, local government. That is an institutionalized form of theft. Because when you're an author and you write a book, and that book is popular, let's say you receive $1 for every book that is sold. Now your book ends up in libraries around the country or around the world, and people have access to your book, but they don't buy it. They pay a very small or no fee at all to the library, and they can access your book. So you don't receive your $1 every time a person reads your book. So technically that is theft. On the other hand, libraries are valuable and respected institutes for a reason. Because they give people access to information. And information leads to cultivation of civilized behavior, of insight, wisdom in yourself, in society, in history, etc. So that kind of justifies institutionalized theft. And everybody personally has to make their own judgment about this. You can go to a bookstore and buy that book rather than taking it from a library. You can take it from a library. Everybody decides that for themselves. And of course you have this with music. Before internet and everything, when you would go to a concert of a famous band, you just paid like $60 for a ticket. Now you pay $600 for a ticket or more. But what happened is that in the past, if you wanted that music, you had to go to a record shop and buy a record or a tape. And later that became a CD. Many people converted their records into CDs and what have you. So lots of intellectual property value was turned over to the artist. Now there are several things to consider here. There is a lot of free access to music. But then, when the artist does a concert, people pay 10 or 20 times as much as they did in the past. So they make money from there as a compensation for the loss of intellectual property rights for music that is enjoyed for free. That's one thing. Well, let me give you an example. You know, what's his name again? Gangnam Style, the very famous Psy. Huh? Psy. When Psy came out with his Gangnam Style, it became the most viewed YouTube video ever. Multiple billions of times it was viewed. He never complained about intellectual property rights. While the whole world was watching his videos and he received very little for it. What happened? You saw him everywhere on the billboards, in the public transport. All the big companies in Korea paid him big money to be their face in their advertising campaigns. So things have just shifted. So when thinking about intellectual property rights, books, music and what have you, films, technically it's theft, but it's a dynamic and fluid thing that people do get their dues one way or another. And there's another thing I noticed also. The people that you admire, your favorite music star, singer, you admire them. One day they appear in the media with very nasty quotes about their music being pirated and what have you. What happens is people stop admiring them because they see the ugly side, the greedy side in them. So there are many things here to be considered. Withholding information from others is a form of theft. So lying can be a form of theft. I need to go a little bit into politics again, because politicians often lie for their own personal gain. So when Corona was a full-blown epidemic, Mr. Trump kept saying it was just a sneeze, it was just a flu, nothing to worry about. In the meantime, hundreds of thousands of people died from it. And he was himself scared to death that he would catch it. We all know this now. That's a blatant lie, of course, knowingly, very consciously. And it cost many people's lives. Very clear example of how withholding information from people is just not a good thing to do. It's a violation of the natural or the universal principles. Many people don't like politics because of this. And we feel strongly attracted, the sensitive ones among us feel strongly attracted to those politicians with integrity. Liz Cheney is a good example. I follow the news a lot because it gives me a sense of what is going on around the world, to connect the dots. Maybe you're not interested, but the point is that people with integrity, people who don't lie, who say it as it is, even when it damages them, when they lose. Liz Cheney lost her governorship as a result of her honesty. That's people with spine, people with courage, and they receive a lot of admiration and backup. And in the long term, they will prevail. In the short term, it's the crooks and the liars that prevail. That's why they lie. That is why they lie in the first place. They don't care about the people they represent, they only care about themselves. On the other hand, being bluntly honest, and we talked about that last week when we discussed truthfulness. Truthfulness and non-stealing in this sense, in this way, are very much linked, because you now have a feeling that if you withhold information from people, it's a form of theft, so you should always tell them everything. But there are things that when you tell them unadulterated, without any holding back, that can really harm people, traumatize people. For example, with children. Children develop in certain ways. When they are under a certain age and you expose them to a certain harsh reality, it can truly traumatize them for the rest of their lives. For example, something about violence in the family or abuse in the family. It's better to keep that away from them until their brain has matured, after 18 maybe, 17, 18, and then discuss those kind of things with your child. So a little bit of prudence is required here, not only with children, but always in relationships also, and at work, with family. The reason why this is important, as mentioned last week also, why we always violate the universal principles, we know that it's not right. Somewhere in the back of our head, we know that it's not right, but it's just so convenient to break the rule that you don't have to do so much effort to do it right. But now that we know that it causes mayhem, that it disturbs harmony, and that it in the long term leads to conflict, suffering, misery, we from now on just need to promise ourselves, not anybody else, promise ourselves to start doing a little bit of effort. When you give someone a compliment, for example, don't just come with those platitudes like, oh, you're so handsome, or you're so pretty. No, look at the person. Take a careful look at the person and see, oh, they're wearing really nice shoes. Say something about their shoes. People really appreciate that. While they hate when people just say, oh, you're so handsome, or you're so pretty. You know that is just, they try to make you feel good, but it doesn't. We need to do a little bit of effort to avoid reacting violent ourselves in violent situation. Instinctively, there is an impulse that wants you to react in kind. You have to break that cycle. With lying, we lie to take shortcuts. We think there is a good intention behind it. Let's just not make things complicated. But it does make things complicated in the long term. It may give you a shortcut now in the moment, but in the long term it will haunt you. It will come back to you. Do a little bit more effort. And with stealing, there is an expression that says stolen goods don't prosper or something like that. It's because you don't respect, if you steal things and you use them for yourself, in the end you don't respect them, and you don't appreciate them as much as you would when you would have just acquired them on your own, with your own abilities, effort, and money that is required. Gives a sense of appreciation, self-respect, etc. About rituals, in Korea you have Chuseok, right? What is Chuseok really? It's a harvest festival, right? So many people think harvest festival, it's to party. Just drink a lot of alcohol and eat lots of food. But what is it really about, originally, is about appreciation for what nature gives us. It is the sun and the water and the effort of the farmer that has led to an abundant harvest. And ancient people knew that without nature, there would be nothing. There would be no food. So people were grateful with every year's harvest. And the festival is of course a celebration, but it's an expression of gratitude towards the universe for providing all that. Just like people that still live in the forest in South America, in Brazil, in the Amazon, they have rituals before anything that they take from the forest. Because we are talking about non-stealing it, they understand that technically it's not theirs. So when they need to make a canoe to be able to navigate the river, they need to chop down a tree, they first have a ritual. And that is not nonsense. It is because they're deeply connected with their environment, and they simply ask the tree for permission to be turned into a canoe. That is what the ritual really means. It's a kind of the ancient way. We have lost all respect for that. We are drilling holes into the mountains and poisoning the sea, the rivers and everything. We're destroying nature. We're depleting nature for the coal and the oil and everything out of greed, but also because we have lost the connection. Many people do not understand anymore how important our environment is, because without our environment there wouldn't be life. And that's why we are now facing what do you call it, climate crisis, is because there are too many greedy people that do whatever they want and like, leading to enormous amounts of carbon dioxide being released through activity, burning of fossil fuels, that bring in huge amounts of money, not only to business people, but also to the governments. So they're very hypocritically, urging us to pay more for gas and fossil fuels and etc. But they will keep selling them. They won't close the mines because it destroys the environment. They will drag every coal and every drop of oil out of the earth just because it's money. So it's very hypocritical to make us feel responsible while they just continue to mine it and to sell it and profit from it. Sensitive people know all this, and they protest, and they try to do their best to contribute as less to that process, but you can't compete with those multi-billion-dollar companies and those governments that just keep acting like this anyway. And that disconnect is caused by our loss of sensitivity. Only being able to function based on the 5 gross senses, and the 6th sense is just dulled and doesn't see the connection anymore between environment and the human being, and doesn't see the importance anymore. Doesn't see how, the earth is a very fragile ecosystem that is unique in the universe. There are many planets where life is simply not possible. Because very important for life is to have a bandwidth, a limited bandwidth of temperature. It cannot be much colder than the lowest limit, and cannot be much higher than the highest limit. Earth has that perfect bandwidth of temperature, allowing organic life to sprout. The other thing is you need the essential building blocks: water, oxygen, amino acids, the proteins that are responsible for building of matter. And all of this is present in just the right amount on the planet Earth, allowing sophisticated life with consciousness as human beings that you find so far nowhere else in the universe. People don't realize how lucky they are to be in this place. And we just keep destroying that place that has allowed us to manifest the way that we did over billions of years of evolution. Starting from one little cell to a very complex construction that even contains consciousness. All right. So theft, you go to the grocery store, you take an apple, you put it in your pocket and you don't pay for it. Everybody understands that's theft, but there are many subtle forms of theft that people don't even consider in that way, that may actually be much more harmful and serious than just stealing an apple or another good from a shop. One more thing before we go on to asana, because people steal from each other too. And I have a very tragic anecdote of a student who came to me 11 years ago, approximately 2011, 12. Her name was Yubin, a 13-year-old girl, very tall, lanky. She came to my morning class in World Gym. Where I managed a yoga studio there in one of the biggest gyms in Korea. I was there every morning. I had my class, and other classes were done by other teachers I hired. Her father came to me and he said, "This is my daughter, Yubin, and I want her to practice yoga." And then he proudly told me that Yubin was going to be a ski kukadepyo. Kukadepyo is national representative, which means that he wanted her to become an Olympic star skiing. So every year she would go to somewhere in the mountains to a resort where there would be a 3-month skiing, just like education. to become a professional skier. And Yubin came to my class, and I immediately felt sorry for her. She was so dark and sad and depressed. But her father forced her to come to my class. Her father was a physical education teacher in a school. He projected all his ambition on his daughter, his oldest daughter. He had hoped to have a son. Like many traditional Korean men, they want their first child to be a son. He had 2 daughters. And the difference between the 2 was huge. I will explain a little bit later. First things first. Yubin came to my class, and now we do a tree pose, and you stretch up, and Yubin was like, no, seriously. So I told Yubin, stretch up a little bit. And I could feel her pain. So okay, forward bend. I always say, focus on your hips, and try to keep your back straight. Elongate your spine. She was like, tree pose. So at first, I tried to correct her a little bit. And then I realized what was going on. Her father wanted her to be a ski star, but she hated it. And he was forcing her. He was forcing her through PT training, a private teacher with a private fitness teacher. He brought her to yoga for flexibility, coordination, I don't know what. I was so sad. After 2 or 3 mornings, I said, I went to Yubin while people were doing an exercise. I whispered to Yubin, if you don't want to do it, just lie down. You don't have to do it. And that kind of gave some relief. I noticed immediately. She felt the pressure a little bit off. So Yubin, you can feel the energy, huh? Very dark, very depressed. She was like this also. But now comes the thing. 8 o'clock the class is finished. I do a little bit of administration and I walk out the building to go home. I lived across the street. You know what I saw? Yubin with her school bag on her back. And she crossed the road like this. She was so happy to go to school. That's what she loved to do. You see the difference in energy here? That's yoga. When you do something that you're enthusiastic about, your energy is here in the crown chakra. When you do something that you're forced to do, that you hate, bang, your spirit dies. And that's what her father did. That's a form of theft. Very, very serious. Sometimes she must be in her early 20s now. I really wonder where she is and what she's doing. I hope that her father saw the light and let her do what she loved to do, studying apparently, maybe become a teacher. Her younger sister didn't have the pressure of her older sister. And she was always, she came together with Yubin on Saturday afternoon. And she was always giggling and pranking and fooling around. 3 years younger than Yubin, I think, a lot smaller. But such a ball of energy, so enthusiastic and joyful and totally opposite of Yubin. Her father was just destroying Yubin while giving all the freedom to the younger one. So sad. Theft. That's why I'm telling you this anecdote. It's very extreme, but not one word exaggerated or lied. Very sad. It's the same with pets. Forcing pets to do tricks and then rewarding them with a treat. People always ask me, does your dog give a pause or do they sit at command? I said, no. Why not? Yeah, because I don't demand them to be able to do that. And they don't understand. I just want them to be dog and do doggy things for the same reason. It's theft. When I was in the Netherlands, just before I came to Korea, a friend of mine, very good friend, dear friend, took me to a dolphinarium, a sea world with dolphins, And I was just crying. I've been practicing yoga for so many years. I hadn't been to a zoo yet since then. And I just felt the suffering of these beautiful, sentient animals that were forced to swim around in circles with nowhere to go, forced to go through hoops and do tricks, and I was just crying. When I was a child, I enjoyed it. I didn't realize it. But I can't go to zoos anymore. Those poor animals should be in nature doing what they do, not be in cages and aquariums for the purpose of entertaining people. Anyway, theft. That's theft of these animals' right to live. I'm trying to tell you here with Yubin's story and the dolphins is that theft takes many forms that people do not realize are in fact a form of theft, and they can be very impactful. All right, questions? Let's have a short break before we continue with asana. Next week there are no double subjects anymore, so it will go a little bit faster. So only last week and this week.